neuropeptides, those supposed communicators, the brain chemistry that makes it all work, there's more of them in our gut than there is in our brain. Bruce Lipton, years ago, carried out a study that is still significant. He took glial cells removed from the tongue with a tongue depressor. He placed some in a petri dish in the lab. He took half of them 5 miles away. He stimulated those inside the petri glass with electric shock. Those 5 miles away responded as though they had received the shock. Mind is not a local event. Consciousness is not limited to the brain. Years ago, I conducted a study where we looked at what you might call auras. In science, we call them bioplasma. Kirlian photography, developed in the Soviet Union, showed us that there is this bioplasma, this discharge about the body. Mystics in all cultures have called them typically auras that surround people. Some people in some parts of the world today use effectively this bioplasma to diagnose conditions of the body before they manifest in the body. We've learned that indeed some theorists believe acupressure and acupuncture manipulate this energy system, and that's perhaps why they're as effective. But more to the point of our consciousness, my particular involvement here was to look at the effect of objects that had charge to them, objects that had been used in crimes versus objects that were thought to be spiritual. Would there be any effect if we did a pre and post test on this so-called bioplasma? Will we be able to see a difference without you being aware that in the room you were in, close to you but behind a curtain, were objects that had been used in a violent crime versus objects like holy water? Okay? The answer was yes. You may ask yourself the next time you're walking down a dark street or going for your car in a dark parking lot and the hackles in your neck stand up and you feel like someone's following you or something's there, and you hurry into the car, lock the doors, and drive away. Where that came from? Well, a part of you has probably sensed something, and you don't know where that sense has come from. But it may have indeed been an important sense. We're still trying to discover what the limits of the mind is, or are, but one thing that we know is it's not a local event. Psi phenomena has shown us clearly something that's been called the 100th monkey syndrome. Ken Keyes published a book, and it was called The 100th Monkey. Now, many scientists today say, you know, that's a marvelous story, but it's not true. I don't know if the story's true or not, but I'll make the point out of this story and then tie it to what we do know. Supposedly in this story, Japanese scientists are studying monkeys. So every day they fly over this island and they spread fruit. Squash, actually, excuse me, not fruit. The monkeys get the squash, and of course they come out of the trees so that they can observe their behavior. One day they see a monkey take the squash to the water and wash it. That's unusual behavior. The next day there are a lot of monkeys washing squash. The following day all the monkeys are washing the squash. They find this amazing. They get ready to report it. Around the world, monkeys are all washing squash before they can report it. Called the 100th monkey. Did it really happen? Key said yes. I've never been able to verify it. I don't know if it did or it didn't. This I do know. Rupert Sheldrake, one of the leading researchers in something we now call M-field, has shown clearly in his research, which has been replicated over and over and over again, that mind fields are created. He's a biologist by trade, so he initially titled all this the morphinogenic field. You know, you take a walnut or an acorn, and that acorn always grows into a oak tree. Why? Why doesn't it become a rhinoceros? Well, biologists call this a morphinogenic field. It's an information field. This information field cues, if you will, everything about a species so that it matures and develops as that species. Is it possible that the mind has its own field? What Sheldrake did was a very interesting experiment, again replicated many, many times. He dedicated a room to teaching Morse code. The first set of students that went through, in fact, all the students were tightly controlled for the same demographics in terms of age and general mental abilities, grades in school and things of that nature. They scored, as was expected, on the bell curve. That is, 70% of them received C's. Okay? The next group came in, they did better than the first. The next group even better. By the time he got to the fifth group, they were all getting A's. They all had learned Morse code in a more accelerated way. His notion was, we're holding within this one dedicated room a mind field. Everyone concentrating on learning Morse code strengthens the field and makes it easier for everyone else. It's a revolutionary idea. Met with a lot of resistance 20 years ago, meets with very little today. Psi researchers have shown the effect of consciousness on machines, literally on machines. Random number generators literally can be predisposed. Among some of the most exciting research to me is research that shows large groups of populations that meditate on peace and lower crime rates. Now, that's not fictional. When 10% of a population focuses on peace, crime rates plummet. Mind is not a local event. Consciousness, then, is much more than what we thought it is. We have scripted within us this I can't syndrome. I hope we've exposed enough of that for each of you to be able to see perhaps some limitation that you've self-imposed. And that limitation says, I can't do that for whatever reason. In order to change that limitation, we have to change the script in the mind. There's a lot of research that shows us changing our expectation changes the expectation of others. The Pygmalion factor is well demonstrated, and all educators should pay attention to this. We run a number of studies where we take children who are labeled learning impaired. We give them to a teacher and we tell them, this is a special gifted student, but he has behavioral disorders. Give him a little extra attention, keep him focused. At the end of the school year, you know what we have? We have an academic student. We have a gifted student. The teacher expected, and somehow that influenced the student, who had formerly been labeled handicapped. One of the studies I ran that was still to this day is very, very important to me, and those of you involved in healthcare, please listen up on this one. If you're a medical doctor today, you insure against an iatrogenic effect. What is that? Well, you know, look, if somebody is under anesthesia and you say, you know, I don't know about this fat old woman, you know, whether, you know, she is going to process that information. And if in your words, I don't know if she's going to recover or not, she's going to have difficulty recovering. That's so well documented that you must have an insurance policy in case you slip. Well, we know that. But what about when you're not under anesthetic influence? Have an oncology study. We're going to tell them, I'm sorry, you know, you have to live, whatever the time is. But we're going to give them a program, and we're going to tell them, but use this program, because the mind has some real powers we still don't understand, and at the very least, it may make everything easier for you. We shipped out all the programs, each of the physicians participating, and obviously they went out over a protracted period. So there was about 1 year in just getting the programs to different patients and different physicians. And then there is waiting to see if it makes any difference. And then there is collecting the data. And in came the data. We had divided our questionnaire to the physicians, one of the follow-ups, into 4 categories. The patient believed that the mind had a role in wellness. The physician believed that the mind had a role in wellness. Both patient and physician believed that the mind had a role in wellness. The physician did not believe the mind had a role at all in wellness. The data showed this. Every single patient whose physician did not believe the mind had the role in wellness was dead 3 years later. Every single patient whose physician and themselves believed the mind had a role in wellness, every single one of them was in remission 3 years later. If you're in healthcare and you suggest to a patient they're dead and they have no hope, they die. But if that patient has hope and you empower it, they live. That should be a message to every person involved in healthcare. Hysterical illness is something we see a lot in the Western world. In an old school, a drum from World War II is found in the basement by a custodian. He's working on a furnace, tips it over, chemical runs out of it. He runs up. You know, what could be in this drum? It's got to be chemicals. The word goes through the school. Everybody in the school shows symptoms of the illness. They all go to the hospital. You know, psychosomatic illness, the symptoms are real. The body is really sick, even if the mind has created it. What's in the drum? Water. Everybody's told it's water. They don't believe it. They're still getting sick. That's hysterical illness. Can the mind cause illness? There is absolutely no question about that. Can the mind punish you? We know that personality types fit health and wellness. If you're a hostile, aggressive kind of a person, that personality is more likely to have a cardiac disease than a personality that introverts, holds it in, and is endearingly sweet. They're more likely to have cancer. It's just a matter of numbers when I say more likely. Is that a coincidence? Is it possible that we choose disease? Listen, when I'm working with entertainers or athletes and they're afraid of performing, the singer never gets a sprained ankle, she gets a sore throat. The athlete never gets a sore throat, he gets a sprained ankle. Is that coincidence? If I don't feel worthy, am I going to accept or reject good that comes to me? We deserve the very best. And when we do our very best, it's okay to say, thank you. I deserve that. Just as much as it is to say, no, I'm just no good at, I'm sorry, I just never could, and to punish ourselves. Now, how many of you can just accept all the good that could be given you? That's an important part in understanding how the mind functions. The placebo effect is well documented. We used to think that 20% of the patients would respond to anything, the so-called sugar pill, in a favored way. Lots of recent studies show 45% will. It doesn't matter. The more authority I give to it, the more I withhold it. You have a waiting control group. And you tell the waiting control group, you're going to participate real soon. We just have you waiting until we finish with this group. And then you're going to get this secret, And you know what happens? The waiting control group improves while they're waiting. Just the hope that I'm going to get this special and it's working on this other group, just that knowledge causes them to improve. Novelty numinosin neurogenesis. Boy, that was a big term, wasn't it? Quick encapsulation. That's the technical term used for how the mind accesses the DNA. Let's run over a couple things now in summation of what I hope we have shared and learned at this point. A belief can be looked at as a noun or a verb. As a verb, there's a role of expectation that exists in our psychology. It may be the expectation about how we should be treated by others. It may be the expectation about what we deserve in life. It may be the expectation about how much responsibility we can displace by blaming, which none of us do now, right? We all forgive. We let go of the thread, right? All of that is fed by this fight, flight, anxiety, depression, fear, anger, get even mentality. And oh, please, when you go home, turn off some of your entertainment, turn off some of your news. We have a cultural ethic worldwide that is developing that essentially says it's okay to get even. It's never been okay to get even. Come on. No spiritual foundation in its core doctrine teaches it's okay to get even. Gandhi taught us there is an obligation to right action. He gave us a peaceful alternative. I don't disagree that there isn't an obligation to right action, but right action is not getting even. Getting even is exacting a price to what? Somehow make yourself feel better? You're not going to feel better. You're going to fill your system with chemicals like cortisol. Cortisol will shrink your brain size. When I was in school, I was taught the brain is the one organ in the body that cannot generate new cells. We know better today. The brain can generate new cells, and if properly stimulated, is like a muscle. Use it or lose it. If I tied one of your arms up, put it in a sling, and kept it there for a year, how strong do you think it would be when you took it out of that sling? If you tie your mind up, you know everything there is, you resist change. I have a VCR. I know how to record and I know how to play. I don't know what all that other stuff is, and I don't want to know. It's too complicated. If you're afraid of embracing change in your life, if you're afraid of new adventures that challenge the mind, look for brain shrinkage. A lot of our reality is based on our expectation. That expectation is based on our belief. That belief is based on our chicken yard learnings. And in that cycle, we find ourselves. It goes without speaking. Everyone here knows that stress attacks your immune system. I'm going to tell you this. When you're stressed, when you're angry, when you're inappropriately fearful, when you hold all this inside you, your body is filling with chemicals that tell the budget of your body, defend, and there's no growth. And what happens? Well, all these chemicals, they shut down the ANS, they shut down the immune, they shut down the endocrine system, and now you're sick. And you say, why? I eat the right foods. I exercise. This is why. You ask somebody when they're 20, do you want to live to be 100 years old? What do they say? Are you kidding? 100 years old? No, get out of here. 30's old. You know who wants to be 100 years old? Every person that's 99. Do you know that the cells of the body have been demonstrated to be capable of living and perfectly duplicating and replicating themselves for 144 years? How many of you here plan to be 144 years old? Good job, Doc. We all should have that timeline in our mind. Year 2000 comes. Everybody is going to talk about centenarians. Here's a television show. My wife says, come and see this. I don't watch much TV. Well, I sit down, and they're interviewing people that are 100 years old. And you know what? They don't look 100. I mean, they don't look at all like what I have in my mind as a 100-year-old person. They're quick, keen-minded. In my mind, I'm thinking, that guy can't be 100 years old. Gosh, he doesn't look much older than I am. We run studies on the centenarian population because it's a fast-growing population in America. We expect that what we're going to find, the secret to being 100 years old, clean living and self-denial. Don't smoke, don't drink, stay away from this food and that food, eat only prepared this way, do this, do that. You know what we found? You all know who George Burns is, the famous comedian. He's a caricature of what we found. You remember Georgie and Gracie? Big cigar, a couple of pretty girls on his arm, laughing and joking, fully engaged in life, not afraid of anything. That's what we found. We found two things: an absence of fear of living, hope, and a sense of connectedness, a purpose, a reason to be here. In engagement, beauty, and awe. That was the secret to living a long, healthy life. That's not at all what we wanted to tell everybody. Of course, you want to tell them, look, don't you dare do this, and don't you dare do this, and you should do this, and you should do that. Not that that's not good advice, but do it because it's good. Don't do it because you're afraid. And don't be afraid to adventure. Like Seligman's hopeless, helpless study. Boy, if there's a seminal study there, let me tell you about it. Seligman's study was conducted this way. He took dogs, he put the dogs in a kennel area. The mat underneath them had an electric grid. He'd make an announcement like Pavlov's ringing bell, and he'd shock the dog. The dog could get up off the mat, run over to the floor, lay down, and there'd be no shock. Carried out the experiment, sufficient number of repetitions, deliver the shock, make the announcement, the dog would run off the mat. What would happen if we didn't give the dog a place to get off the mat? Make the kennel smaller, deliver the announcement, pair the shock. Dog has nowhere to go. Jumps up, nowhere to go. Stop delivering shock, just make the announcement. Dog lays and quivers. Doesn't even try to move. What's happened to the dog's immune system? It's shut down. The dog has no hope. It's trapped. No escape. And every part of its physical system literally began to fail. The human mind, we haven't yet begun to tap its potential. But we know this: it is totally capable, through your belief choices, of punishing you. And hopelessness is a certain path to early death. The mind modulates the autonomic nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system. The mind does. It also plays a role in this latent DNA, this 90% of latent DNA and its manifestation. And that is an exciting find. Our memory and our expectation form the context for both healing and disease. Our memory is a timeline from the beginning to now. My expectation of where that timeline goes, what am I going to be like when I'm 100 years old? It's a habituator. It develops patterns, and we utilize those patterns over and over and over again. And those patterns, most of which are hidden from us, exist in our subconscious, And they're a part of defense mechanisms or strategies we developed as we matured in our maturation process to avoid conflict and to find acceptance. Changing those memories involves sometimes revivifying old memories. And we have discussed false memories, but revivifying is the process that I explained to you earlier, where in a dream I saw what happened and then knew. When we create a profile, a program, we don't put a lot of stuff on that program that says, if you don't do this, you'll die. That's negative, it's aversive. Okay, so maybe I'm going to get in trouble right this minute, but I'm going to say this. If you're going to have a smoking program, you don't put on that program, stop smoking or die. You just don't do that. First of all, most smokers are going to attempt to quit several times before they're ever successful. And what, when they restart, you want them, oh, I'm dead. You just don't do that. That's totally aversive. What we do when we create a program is take a profile of a person that's not a smoker. Somebody says to me, how do you create a success program? Well, that's real simple. You sit down with entrepreneurs who are at the best of their field. And you say to them, what goes through your mind when? Because what you want to do is create a positive script that is a profile of the person you want to be, not a profile of what you don't want to be. We create by choice. You may not think we do, but all of quantum mechanics, including the Nobel Prize-winning observation that essentially says, if I decide I want to look at an electron in a certain way, it will manifest as a particle. So if I make up my mind I want to see a particle, I'll find a particle. If I make up my mind I want to see a wave, I'll find a wave. I'll never find both, and I'll never find random. The principle of quantum mechanics that says we live in a holograph itself, David Bohm's holographic universe. And that this holograph participates in our consciousness. That principle of uncertainty, the quantum is as real in our body as it is in deep space, as it is in quarks and neutrinos. We literally create, according to physicists, our world. Mystics would say, as you sow, so you reap. If the mind up here expects negativity, what will it get? What it expects, of course. If the mind up here expects positive, what will it get? Positive, of course. If you want to make $1 million, you must believe that you can make $1 million. Unless you win a lottery, you must believe that you deserve good. And then be willing to accept it. Your mind is co-creating your reality, if not in a quantum model, which I happen to subscribe to, and the literature is so robust. I think your Newtonian physics will be gone in the next decade because we will integrate the quantum and 0 point within current views of physics. Whether in that sense or not, in just the sense of how we already see the mind controls our expectation, our behavior, and our body. We create the overall quality of our own life. What do we do to empower ourselves? How do we get on this personal empowerment journey? If we take everything that we've learned today and we assemble these individual puzzle pieces, ranging from our defense mechanisms, our maladaptive behaviors, our chicken yard learnings, our subconscious potential, the savantry that we apparently are capable in the brain, if we take all these parts and we put them together, How will we empower ourselves? Well, the very first thing we're going to do is change how we talk to ourselves. I don't care how you do that. A lot of the research that I've carried out has been in my own lab. But there's a very fair question that I'm aware of. If you ask me about my research, and I've done the research alone, you have a right to ask about its credibility. Because doesn't he, after all, sell this stuff? I'm really very aware of that. We farm the research out. We have what we call doc squads. Doctoral candidates, they don't know what to do their dissertation on. They go to their chair. He turns them to me. We work out a protocol. I send it back up to his chair. Sometimes there's funding involved. And then the university and the student carry out the study. It's totally double-blind. It's divorced from me. That's how you run clean, non-contaminated research and at the same time sell a product. If I'm going to empower myself, the very first thing I'm going to tell you is you have to change your stream of consciousness. However you do that today. Do it first by forgiving and letting go of all blame. You've got to do that. Do it second by taking responsibility for everything in your life. Everything. You meet a situation and perhaps you had nothing to do with the situation. The guy's wagging his finger saying, you hid behind my car so I'd run into you. When you meet that situation, take responsibility to change it into a positive outcome. If not for that person, at least for yourself. If the flower pot falls on your head, try to think out of the box. What is the best thing I can do in this situation, taking responsibility for it, to have a positive outcome? Get connected to others. One of my favorite books right this minute is by Dr. Wayne Dyer. I cannot recommend this book too much. Intention. It's not my intention to make $1 million. It's not my intention to become the best in my field. That's not what he means by intention. By intention, what Dyer refers to is purpose. Purpose. What's your purpose? What are you here for? What's life about? Is it about more? Is it about money? What's your purpose? You know, whenever I talk, like most speakers, you ultimately get to a point where people say, well, how do I know my purpose? How do I find my purpose? No, I would imagine that it'd be hard for many of you to give me your purpose. 1, 2 words or 1 sentence. What's your purpose? I mean, are you an accident? What breathes life into you? You know, we've run studies on near-death experiences, so-called afterlife, communications, the clairvoyance that talk to the dead. Is that really possible? Tightly controlled studies. The studies all suggest there is more to you than the pure Darwinian animal that evolved from a single-cell mechanism that will end when you end. If you're a spiritually connected person, you say, so what? I knew that. But if you're not a spiritually connected person, and a lot of academics aren't, that's nonsense. But the data shows clearly it's not nonsense. However, let's go back to James. Let's just be pragmatist. How am I going to get connected? I have to have a purpose to get connected. What's the purpose? I once did a sabbatical. Write a book, Thinking Without Thinking. I went to Big Bear, California, which is a resort destination, a beautiful lake up there, and I spent 3 years, 2.5 years. While I was there, people knew who I was, started asking me if I wouldn't speak here, or speak there, or become involved in this, or become involved in that, and I did. I was grateful to do it. I was flattered. And one day I was leading a small group, and we were talking about purpose. And I told them a story. True story. I lived in Las Vegas, Nevada, leaving my office one day. As I turned down Russell, it was a motorcycle, a moped, not even a full motorcycle, one of those little things. On the side of the road, car had hit it, the man off on the ground. And I'd seen that moped many, many times on my way to the office. And the man that rode it was an older man, 85. And he was always sitting out in front of this little trailer, cheap, old, run-down trailer. Always sitting out when I passed him in the morning. Looked like he was reading, and just sitting there by the trailer with his moped parked alongside. And I noticed him several times. So when I came around the corner and I saw this, to me I could see this person. The person was on the ground, there was some blood, the bike was smashed, the car is there are people, they're calling law enforcement, obviously, and nobody is doing anything about this man. Now, I'm very aware that you can get sued if you try and help somebody, and that somebody then later says, well, you know, when he moved me or when he lifted me, this happened or that happened. But you know, there's no way I could just drive by. I had to stop my car. I had to go to this man, if for nothing else, and to talk to him. Everybody else was standing around waiting for law enforcement. Now, I told this story to this small group in California. I said, Mike, you shouldn't have done that. You just shouldn't have done that. You know what can happen to you when you do those kinds of... No, you know, you have to go by it. The way things are today, you can't get involved in those kinds of things. That's not your business. Every single one of them. And I was appalled. Absolutely appalled. I don't know what your legal system is here today. I hope to goodness you would not pass somebody who was just injured in a vehicle accident and wait for law enforcement to get there, at least to give them some hope. But I can't live here. I can't live here. These people and I just simply don't agree on that. You know, the point I was trying to make was this. This little old man looked at me, eye to eye, said, thank you. Thank you. I wasn't hurt that badly, as it turned out. And you know, I'd pass him days later. He's still sitting there. And I'd wave and he'd wave back. And you know what? In here, I felt really good. I still feel really good. I want you all to feel really good. How do you get that quintessential experience? How do you get it? Gerald Jampolsky in his attitudinal centers has shown us patience in incontractable pain. When they go to the aid of another patient, the pain disappears. What's your purpose? I'm going to tell you what your purpose is. It's to have that quintessential feeling. It's to experience awe. Now, if for no other reason, that every time I revivify a story that has quintessential feeling in it, my body is bathed with these wonderful opiates. All the cells say, oh goody, let's go to work and grow some more. My timeline is extended. I'm going to live longer. I'm going to have more fun. I'm going to meet more people. I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm not going to live in fear. If for no other reason than that practical reason. So what is my purpose? What is your purpose? Your purpose is to help others. Pure and simple. If you're a carpenter and you're building something for someone, you do your very best at doing it for them. Not for the money, but for them. Is this how you like it, ma'am? Whatever you do, do it for others. I'm not here for me today. I hope I'm here for you. And I hope that what we convey back and forth today, you leave not with something you say, you know, that just doesn't fit my personality. I'm a get-even guy after all, you know. John Wayne. I hope you leave and you do say, I'm gonna at least try this. Just try it. That's all. Just try it a little. You know, in mathematics and physics, there is something known as chaos theory. Carl Preggione won the Nobel Prize for the theory of dissipative structures, built on chaos theory. That theory essentially says that even though you see a structure dissipating, going through entropy, it's moving to a higher order. That theory tells us that a tiny perturbation of a butterfly in Malaysia can affect a tornado in Ohio, USA. I hope that at least out of this I have perturbed you. That there is some perturbation. That you do use some of what we've talked about. But I'm going to tell you most assuredly, if you decide, okay, I'll just try this, I want you to keep a diary. And every night when you go to bed, I did a good deed today. I'm going to digress a bit and tell you about a client I once had. Client was a clinical depressive. Client self-mutilated, had suicidal tendencies, and attempted a couple of times. Now, not real attempts, because the client was very capable of killing herself. Attempts that got her a lot of attention, and they were attempts. Self-mutilation since she was a child. Been in therapy for years. She's a grown woman now, on all kinds of medication. I'm looking at a jacket, pre-processing papers, and I see this woman's first therapist is Milton Erickson. Now, any of you that have studied psychology or hypnosis know who Milton Erickson is. I mean, hello, sir. If he couldn't help her, what am I going to do? What is she doing here? This man is an icon to me. Well, take everything you've known, Eldon, and just throw it out. You're not going to do anything that's been done. And between him and this whole list of therapists, this woman's had everything come at her. You can count on it. So what are you going to do? I honestly was there. What am I going to do? Well, I could tell her where the door is. I'm sorry, my list is too full. That would keep my pride intact. But that isn't what you do if you're a therapist. It isn't what you do if you're a carpenter. It isn't what you do if you're a secretary. It isn't what you do if you're a political leader. Remember your purpose, service. So the question is, how can I be of service? The woman would become hysterical in the first couple of 3 minutes you try to carry any conversation with her. And she would sob and sob and sob. And you could do nothing with the sobbing. So I had a mirror, been given to me by a friend, and I used to use it to demonstrate how the two halves of your faces are different. He was a cosmetic surgeon, and it would sit up here, and you could see this half, and then you could see this half, and holy cow, you're right, this eye doesn't open as much as this eye. Why, my ears aren't even. Things that you never see unless you see them in halves and then put the halves together, but we're all made that way. And I thought, I wonder if this woman saw herself crying, if that would stop her, at least long enough for me to be able to communicate with her, because what good is an hour if it's just crying? I'm going to leave her last name out. Marie, look at that mirror while you're crying. When you're through, I'll come back. I left the room. Pretty quick, she wasn't crying. Come back in, I sit down. Look at that mirror, I'll be back. Didn't take long before she quit crying. The crying was what? Well, it may have been a way to delay the therapy. It may have been a way to get attention. I don't know. What I do know is I could do nothing as long as she cried, and I had to come up with some way. Now, what am I going to do now? She's not crying. Maybe I was better off letting her cry. I could sit there. The hour's over. Thanks. See you next week, same time. The only thing I could think of, I've got to stop this woman's self-indulgence on how pitiful, how poorly, how miserable she is, life is, the world is. She's got to have hope. How am I going to give her hope? I'm going to put her in service. That's what I'm going to do. I gave her a diary. Marie, this week, every single day of this week, you are to perform one good deed. Good deed? What's that got to do with my therapy? You want to be here, you're going to do, as you agreed, what I asked you to do. You're going to perform one good deed. And you're going to write it in this book. And when you get in bed at night and you fill that out, I want you to think about the deed you did and how it made you feel. And I don't care what the good deed is. You're standing in line, the person in front of you is short a quarter, give them the quarter. You help somebody across the road. You help somebody in your office that you don't even like, but you're going to help them? Hey, that's even better. But you do a good deed every single day. And you keep it in the diary, and you bring me the diary next week, and we're going to talk about that diary. And that's what he did. And she did it week one. And some of these good deeds, they were, is that a good deed, Marie, really? Okay, how did it make you feel? But you see, now we were no longer talking about how terrible the world was. We were talking about what she was doing for other people. We turned the focus from life sucks and then you die to what I'm doing to help others. Week 2, you had to do 2 good turns every day. And some of these miserable good turns, let's improve them, you know. It's easy to do a good deed. You're holding a door for somebody. You're saying thank you. Las Vegas, Nevada, everything is fast. When you're a criminalist, that's a wonderful place to have a practice. You decide to get married and have children. It's not a great place to raise kids, so you kind of move. That's how I got to Washington. But Las Vegas, Nevada, everything moves so fast that you get people that are just in ruts, and they're just nasty. And I had a post office that I went to every day. And these were government workers, so they're not threatened. You know, they got better than tenor as a professor. And there were 3 sourpuss guys there. They were so named. This needs string on it. Take it back. This is the wrong paper. Get it out of here. I mean, they were just nasty. Rude, discourteous, and nasty. And I made it a point. I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to change this. I'm going to take responsibility for this. When I go into the post office, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to beam, you know, whatever that means. Some kind of, isn't life wonderful energy to these people? And when I get up there to them, I'm going to say, hi, how are you today? Gosh, I'm going to be friendly and charming. And you know, when I first started doing that, hey, it was hard. Hi, how are you today? What do you want? You know, hey, you're looking good today. What, didn't I look good yesterday? It was hard. But I'm going to tell you, and I swear to you this is true, 30 days after I walked into that post office, I could walk in there. Hi, Doc, come right on over here. I'll help you. They were warm and friendly with me, and it was just mirroring back to me what I'd given them. Marie started to improve the good deeds she was doing. She started to try to be an active influence. That is, as I did in the post office. Meet that nasty look with a smile. Meet that impatient clerk with, gee, you must be really pressed, but you're doing a wonderful job, and I sure appreciate it. Meet that person that looks down, shoulders off with, "Good morning, Charles. How are you today? Gosh, you look good." Do your best with every human being you run into to lift their spirit, to make them feel like life is wonderful, living is fantastic, and keep your diary. Here's my challenge to you. If you do that and you're not healthier, happier, 30 days from now, send me a bill. Marie, within 60 days, she was off all pharmacology under supervision. Within a year, she was no longer clinically depressed, totally wonderful young woman, wonderful person, went out of her way every day. Depression was gone. Why? Because the focus wasn't on I, me, and all the miserable things that happen in life. I'm going to illustrate this with a story. This is a little colorful, so I'm going to try and tame it. I told you I have an associate in South Africa. He's in law enforcement. He wants to see, interrogation methods improved. He's forward-thinking.